Alright, so Godzilla X Kong the New Empire is officially released, and with the entire MonsterVerse franchise, with a total of 5 complete movies, and even with these films that are sort of good, but even with sometimes with them being a complete letdown due to human interactions and their storylines, but even with the battles between these titans, and even the destruction that happens all throughout these movies, I really adore this franchise and what has been building up to, especially with all the connections with these titans and so much more as well. And so this will be my full ranking of all 5 films in the MonsterVerse from worst to best, and give you guys my thoughts and opinions on why it's there, and just so much more and that as well. And so if you're new here, then be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss on any future vids. But now let's just hop into it. And now, coming at last place at number 5 is Godzilla King of the Monsters. And now, I remember when I saw this movie on opening weekend back in 2019, and even with the film that had, this is the continuation of Godzilla after the 2014 movie, and even with Godzilla that had to go up against this three-headed monster called the King Ghidorah, and that's what Godzilla was up against, and especially with all the destruction that this villain caused. Even that it had Millie Bobby Brown, Vera Farmiga, as it played a mother and daughter in the film, especially with the addition of Kyle Chandler. But even with the entire movie, I thought it was a disappointment because you feel like the first hour of the movie that has so many human interactions and storylines that I did not even care about, but because even with these storylines that I didn't end up becoming interesting or didn't really stick the landing towards the end of the movie, but even towards the third act, that's when the real showdown happens, especially like in that stadium, and like just with the entire battle, it felt really good with some sacrifices that were made. But even that this is the continuation of Godzilla, and even with, I think Monarch was involved, but even with this movie, I thought it was a slightly good installment, but it was not perfect. It was a disappointment, but I liked all the stuff that was the continuation of Godzilla in this movie. Next up at number 4 is Godzilla from 2014. Now, this is the film that kickstarted the MonsterVerse, which I thought this was a decent movie, and even with the design of Godzilla in that film, which looked amazing. I like the design, especially as it came out back in 2014, and even as it had Aaron Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen as they played a married couple. But before, they played a Quicksilver and Wanda Maximoff in the MCU, but like now with Aaron Taylor Johnson's character that played a Navy expert that like has to go on a mission, especially because of his father, played by Bryan Cranston, and that this is because in the wake of Godzilla that's caused like massive destruction. But even with the entire film, it was like a miss across the board, especially with everything that happens towards the third act of the movie, with all the destruction that Godzilla causes, and that is so especially with the army, especially with the soldiers that are on a mission to destroy the monster with Godzilla. And on top of that, this was also directed by Gareth Edwards, that would later go on to do Rogue One and the creator of the most underrated movie. But even for what he adapted with his vision and his directing style of bringing Godzilla to life to kick off the MonsterVerse, I feel like he did a good job. And even that with everything that happens towards the end, I feel like it was a waste, but I feel like it was a good, decent time just to enjoy seeing Godzilla, especially in its full form, especially as it kickstarted off this franchise, which I don't mind this movie at all, but it could have been better, but it did build up things towards over time. And next up at number 3 is Godzilla X Kong the New Empire. Now, this is the recently released movie, and this is with Kong, who is now adjusting to life on Hollow Earth. And now, even along with the other Titans, that he has found his home, and even after his fight with Godzilla, but now, even with Godzilla and Kong, they're now working together to defeat this threat that is within the Hollow Earth, and that is with Scar King, especially with the villain of this film that looked really good, and I like the design of this antagonist. But when it came down to the story and the plot, it just really lacks the entire movie, especially with the human interactions. But even though I liked our main characters, especially with the our returning characters, such as with Eileen Andrews, her daughter Ajaya, especially with Dan Stevens and Brian Tyree Henry, they did well with their decent roles in this movie. But even with the character interactions and their storylines, I feel like some of which could have been cut out, but it was fine. But even with the destruction and the final showdown that happens towards the third act with these Titans versus the Scar King, I feel like it was amazing. I thought it was really good, especially with that glove, with this technology that Kong has on his hand. It felt really cool to witness, and even with everything that happens, I feel like it was a waste. But I feel like with a villain that could have been introduced way early on. But even with everything that happens towards the end of the movie, I feel like it was a good enough battle. But I wish I could have seen more of that. But again, I really enjoyed the movie, and I was a bit satisfied. And next up at number 2 is Godzilla vs. Kong from 2021. And now, especially going into this movie, even with the marketing and the trailers that sets out to be like, who will win this fight? Will it be Godzilla? Will it be Kong? And it was teasing this a massive showdown, and it really showed that, because we saw these titans as enemies, and they were gonna go up against each other, and now only one will win. And I just really enjoyed it, especially as it introduced a Mecha Godzilla, and I like the human interactions. I like their storylines of what the human part of it was to adapt in the story, especially with their expertise, especially with these titans. But even with the highlights that I enjoyed, especially with that ship battle, especially with Godzilla and Kong, and even with Kong that was really going at it for when he punched Godzilla, and that was an epic fight to me, especially with the third act and the final showdown that happens in Tokyo, and that's where it really comes together, and that's where the trailers really showed it, and it really teased this really epic fight, and that's why with the title it's called Godzilla versus Kong. But even though I would have wanted to see like less human interactions and more on the Titans, and even at the end of Hollow Words, and that's where it continued with Godzilla x Kong, and I hope that they continue to build out the MonsterVerse, especially with more movies that they have planned in their slate. But I think this movie did a decent job at setting up these titans for an epic fight. But coming in number 1 is Kong Skull Island, and now I think this is my favorite film in the franchise. Plus, I have to admit myself that I am Team Kong, because even with Kong and how he looked, how he was designed, it looked pretty dang good, and even that it showed his destruction of what he could really do. He was truly a monster that he is introduced way early on in the movie, especially as these soldiers, these like scientists are like exploring an island on the Pacific Ocean, and even with Kong that's like causing all this destruction, and it is massive. And we see him like early on like destroying all the helicopters with the people on it, and even that this had Tom Hiddleston, Brie Larson, and Samuel L. Jackson, as we all know from the MCU, as Loki, Captain Marvel, and Nick Fury, and also with the addition of John Goodman, and with all the additional cast members. I thought they did a good job, and even with exploring Skull Island, and even with exploring everything that's on it, and even with the third act, with that showdown with Kong, with that creature, and with everything that has happened. Plus, like I think there are some twists involved, and it even with some like sweet kills that happened. But even after that post-credit scene, that was teasing more movies like later on in the MonsterVerse franchise. But I think that this was, I think, my favorite film in the franchise, and even with Kong, that has set out to be like a very awesome Titan, which I pretty much enjoyed, and I think that this is remains like the best film. And so there you have it. This is my ranking of all the films in the MonsterVerse franchise. And like even though sometimes I'm not a fan of these movies, but even though that like these films are decent, but even though like what the ones that I do end up satisfying me just a little bit, it's fun to explore these two Titans, especially with the human storylines of what their part is in each of the films. And yeah, I just really enjoy this franchise, and I hope that they continue to build this franchise up, especially within the next couple movies with our two titans, Godzilla and King Kong as well. And so that's going to be it for this video. Just let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below, and how would you rank all these films in the MonsterVerse franchise, and just what is your ranking, and also if you've seen Godzilla X Kong, just let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe and turn on notifications about future videos. And also follow all my social medias, which are linked down below. And with that, I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.